The Monomyth is Joseph Campbell's framework for a heroic journey, and it is a framework that he developed after studying the mythology and folklore of different cultures globally and finding the themes that were consistent throughout. This is a framework that he outlines, well, not really outlines, he explains in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and there are lots of different mechanisms involved in this arc and lots of different directions that the hero's journey can take. But the main parts of it are your departure, which is the hero's call to action and decision to ultimately embark on the journey. The initiation, which is when the hero experiences their trials and tribulations, slays the dragon, searches for the treasure, is tested, is challenged, all of that. And then the return is when the hero has ultimately accomplished their goal, whatever it was, and is ready to return with this treasure, with this enlightenment that they have found during their journey. With the monomyth, there are lots of different ways that it can go, but ultimately I think the hero always is going to experience some kind of metamorphosis, some kind of transcendence. And in the book, Campbell, he explains that the hero, therefore, is the man or woman who has been able to battle past his personal and local historical limitations to the generally valid and normal human forms. So, as I said, the hero, in order to be a hero of a monomyth, the hero must transcend. The hero must be changed. Assuming they're changed for the better, but they must be changed. They must become something more than human, something more than kind of the average person will be. This is a storytelling structure that is present in lots of different kind of media, but one place where I did notice it was in The Last Days of Ptolemy Gray by Walter Mosley. Now, this is a book about a 91-year-old man with dementia who is kind of racked with this feeling of survivor's guilt after witnessing the lynching of his best friend and his best friend and mentor as a boy. And this is also coupled with the crippling grief that he feels over losing his wife Cynthia, who was the love of his life. It is after the untimely and unexpected passing of his nephew that he meets a young girl named Robin who comes to assist him. And as their relationship develops and as she helps him kind of break out of this kind of shell and bubble that he's put himself in, he's able to find the courage and the strength to finally confront these feelings that he's been kind of wrestling with and fighting with in his own mind for a number of years. For Ptolemy, his monomyth takes the form mostly of a spiritual journey, and he's trying to piece these things back together and quell this kind of overwhelming fear that he's developed over time, this feeling of the need to be overly cautious, overly protective of himself. He is able to contend with all of these feelings, and ultimately he does not come out strong and alive, but he does come out of it changed. He does come out of it into a peaceful state, and in this state, this is when he finally passes, and is no longer kind of racked with his guilt, no longer feeling this grief. He's just able to just be at peace finally. Through the process of him working through all these feelings, he ultimately lands on this need to avenge his nephew in a way. And I won't give it away, but he ultimately lands on this need to avenge his nephew and to finally like redeem himself for what he wasn't able to do for Coy Dog. And you could also argue what he wasn't able to do for his nephew to prevent his passing. So after as I said, after Ptolemy is able to work through his survivor's guilt, work through his grief, he ultimately lands on this need to avenge his nephew and to finally, commit this last heroic act in order to be at peace and in order to finally rest. And then there's also this like side quest that Ptolemy goes on. There's a whole meeting with the devil, this magical elixir that sends fire into his body. There's treasure. There's there's everything. You have it all. But I won't get into that because I think it's more fun to go on that adventure with him. But as I said, there is this side quest, and I think it also follows the heroic arc kind of in a more archetypal, more like very English, easily distinguishable way. Like it's very like the arc is there. The arc is very clear with that. Going back to his spiritual journey, I think what Ptolemy's monomyth shows us is that, you know, it's never too late to finally embark on that heroic journey, whatever that looks like for you. You're never too sick. You're never too old. You're never too afraid. Like you can, like these are all things that can be worked through. And as I said, as Campbell tells us, the hero, in order to kind of have a fully realized monomyth, they come out the other side metamorphosized. They come out of it better. They come out of it changed. There's a letter that appears at the beginning of the book that is written at the end of Ptolemy's life. And in this, he kind of ironically, he asks Robin, why live a whole life being careful and then throw it away at the end? And it is ironic because, you know, he's lived all this life being careful and doing the things that you think you're supposed to do and the things that are supposed to bring you peace. But ironically, that is the thing that brought Ptolemy so much heartache, so much grief, so much fear. And it is this kind of taking on this risk to oneself, this risk to one's own interest, and, you know, just jumping headfirst into a selfless act or a number of selfless acts. That is what it took for Ptolemy to finally find peace. So I said, like, that question is ironic because, you know, a life lived carefully is not necessarily going to be a life well lived. You'd hope that you'd come to that conclusion before the end of your life, but some people, you know, you may not come to it at all. But Ptolemy, thankfully, he comes to it, you know, right at the end, right when he's not really necessarily on the precipice of death, but he comes to it, you know, right at the right time, where the stars aligned for him to finally, you know, do this one last thing and, you know, finally have this one heroic act that he can take and, you know, finally be at peace with how he lived his life. He ends the letter ultimately saying, like, to this last heroic act that he's going to commit, that is, I mean, in a number of ways is very ill-advised. He says, you know, very definitively, I have to do this. And, you know, spoken like a true hero.